It all starts with a guy trying to convince the MC to stop overthinking and just sign the paper. But our boy hesitates, feeling like something is super sketchy about this whole deal. Still unsure, he asks if this is actually a safe move to make. But the man slams the table in annoyance, aggressively reminding him to stop thinking about it. Trying to win him over, his buddy asks if he would really scam a high school friend and brings up the guaranteed compound interest of the operation. He confidently claims that the money practically multiplies itself and that he is only hooking him up out of pure kindness. The scammer even brings up the heartbreaking moment he saw the guy hustling on the phone during his own father's funeral. That memory of having to bow down to his boss at the wake really hits him right in the feels. A sudden wave of anger washes over him when hearing about his dad, but his hands were tied. All he could do was hope his friend's kindness was genuine, so the document is finally signed. But in the end, the guy across the table shows his true colors, thinking the MC is a complete fool. Fast forward 2 whole years to present day, inside a dark and depressing apartment, the MC is hunched over the toilet, feeling incredibly sick. Completely wrecked, he regrets throwing up the first decent meal he managed to eat in months. At 28 years old, his life has plummeted way below any standard society would consider acceptable. That jerk who ruined him vanished 1 year ago, leaving behind only a pathetic struggle to survive in a sea of debt. With 5 hours left before his work shift, he decides to read a bit, his only hobby in an awful routine. Just 30 minutes with his favorite web novel called Dark Heather would be enough. Even after reading it over 100 times and memorizing every page, the story still pulls him in. This little moment is his only lifeline to escape that hellish life. Suddenly, he jumps up after noticing something strange in the air. A shiny black feather gently floats in front of the window pane. Curious about this, he wonders if it is just a feather from a random crow. But in the blink of an eye, the MC starts coughing up a lot of blood out of nowhere. He is completely bewildered seeing the liquid entirely stain the pages of his favorite story. A crushing pain hits him right in the chest. He starts running out of breath while a purple aura surrounds the book. Completely drained of strength, he just laments how miserable his whole life has always been. It felt like total nonsense for his entire existence to end right there in such a useless and sudden way. However, right in that final moment, something inside him starts to fiercely boil. The last image that invades his fading mind is exactly the sadistic smile of that scammer. In the end, surrounded by floating feathers and dark energy, he meets his end feeling frustrated for not getting a chance at payback. A mysterious system completes the quest and promises a special skill based on his desire, making the guy desperately gasp for air. He wakes up startled in a luxurious bed, panting and wondering if it had all been just a bad dream. However, something completely catches him off guard. Looking around, it dawns on him that this classic environment makes zero sense for his reality. The place looks more like a resting hall in a massive palace. A very strange noise coming from the window immediately grabs his attention. A crow with glowing red eyes stares right at him from outside the glass. Glancing at the scenery outside, he freezes seeing dozens of those creepy birds and a sky with 3 moons. Without any warning, the creature shatters the glass and dive bombs into the room, making him scream in terror. He falls on the bed begging for help, convinced that insomnia created this brutal hallucination. In his panic, the guy tries to force himself to wake up from this madness any way he can. Surprisingly, the giant bird just gently rests its head on his hand. The friendly vibe of the animal snuggling in his lap leaves him totally confused. But the calm does not last long, as the bird soon flaps its claws and takes flight once more. Along with it, the whole shadowy flock waiting outside decides to leave in the dead of night. With the path clear of distractions, he finally focuses his eyes on the horizon beyond the castle. The night sky shows off immense colorful moons floating over a vast city with medieval architecture. A huge flag hoisted on the roof displays an insignia he knows all too well. Staring at his reflection in the window glass, the truth hits him hard that this body and this world were not his original ones. Before he could process the new face, the voice of the maid Anna echoes from the hallway calling for Prince Ranabiran. Panic kicks in instantly, and he begs the woman not to open the door. In his rush to make up an excuse about not feeling well, he trips over his own feet and face plants on the floor. The loud crash seriously spooks the young girl outside the room. now on the bedroom rug, he groans in pain from the bump he took to the head. Anna apologizes and promises to come back later while he processes the name he was just called. That wild reality belonged to the novel he knew almost by heart. He had ended up right in the cruel and dark universe of Dark Heather. Anxiety takes over as he realizes the weight of the situation since he now possessed the body of the Empire's seventh prince. The big issue is that this kid was a shallow villain destined to meet a miserable end right at the start of the story. Upset, he sits down feeling defeated, cursing his bad luck for reincarnating into the worst possible character. His complaints are cut short by a deep male voice announcing Sign's arrival. The MC freezes in shock, instantly recognizing the prince's ruthless personal secretary. The tall guy in a suit walks through the door accompanied by the maid, pointing out it was not like him to skip a meal. Looking very calculating, Sign adjusts his glasses and asks about the noble's well-being. With his nerves running high, he decides his only shot at surviving is to act like the real Abiron. He tries to hide the tension and quickly confirms he was already feeling better. Satisfied with the answer, the secretary just orders Anna to serve the food right there on the room's table. The girl shakes like a leaf as she sets down a tray with a meal so pathetic it looked like dog food. Trying to grab the teapot to serve himself, he accidentally bumps the staff member's hand. The sudden contact makes the maid drop the heavy object, spilling liquid all over the dark wood. Immediately, the young girl's eyes go wide in pure terror. She drops to her knees on the floor, desperately begging for forgiveness, leaving the guy totally puzzled. Faced with this bizarre and completely submissive reaction, he realizes just how terrifying the reputation of the body he now inhabited really was. Hearing her desperate apologies, the MC finally remembers the terrible reputation of Reina Biron. The Trash Prince was famous for wrecking things and being violent, even going as far as eliminating his own servants, which totally explained the woman's panic on the floor pleading for her life. Meanwhile, Sane approaches the table and comments with a mocking tone that he was quite surprised to hear the noble was feeling sick. The secretary flashes a cynical smile and claims to be relieved to see him well, apologizing for interrupting the meal like that. Without missing a beat, the guy unrolls the budget documents right in front of him, demanding a signature under the excuse that it was an urgent matter. Pen in hand, Abiran finds this lame excuse hilarious, since a useless and dense prince like him would never handle anything important. It is instantly clear that those papers are forged, and the man's real goal is to skim the portion of the budget that rightfully belonged to him. A mere lackey only had the guts to go that far because he was a relative of the Empress, a woman who held crushing influence over that entire world. Knowing the body's original owner was too clueless to spot the scam, the MC hesitates on whether he should just sign to keep the plot on track. Noticing the delay, Sane openly mocks him, asking if His Highness had forgotten how to sign his own name and that it would be pretty embarrassing. Ticked off seeing an imperial family member treated like garbage by a subordinate, he curses his luck again for reincarnating into a loser. The secretary keeps up the act faking pity and reinforces that this is exactly why the youngster needs his help, telling him to stop overthinking and just sign. Immediately, that bossy order triggers the dark memories of his past life. Those exact same words were used by the guy who ruined him back on Earth, using the same psychological pressure to pull off the financial scam. At that moment, a fury takes over his chest as he realizes that caving in would just be repeating the same pathetic life of a helpless victim he had before. Breathing heavily, the guy decides he absolutely refuses to live that submissive way ever again. Standing his ground, Abiran confronts the secretary head-on, pointing out that he ran the numbers and that document was a blatant waste. The lackey's reaction is to give a creepy smile, cynically claiming he had underestimated him by thinking he was not capable of that kind of logic. Right after, Sane tries to shift the focus, warning him the food would get cold and promising to double-check the math once he signed the papers. To shut the topic down, the man grabs the teapot and again tells the noble not to think about it, but is suddenly cut off by a loud crash. The maid, who was still nearby, freezes in terror witnessing the scene. The secretary's glasses and pocket watch have just been smashed on the floor in the middle of a puddle of spilled liquid. Totally in shock, Sane asks what the meaning of this is, but the MC, leaning over the table, sneers, saying his hand slipped. He knew perfectly well that this arrogant dude's relation to the Empress was so distant that she did not even know this creep existed. Ignoring the fury of the subordinate, who is sputtering with rage, Abiran leans back in his chair, as chill as can be. The sheer audacity of his attitude makes the guy boil with anger, trembling intensely from being defied like that. Determined not to meet his maker like in the original story, the prince flips the blame, accusing the lackey of distracting him and that the mess was now his problem. Tired of a lifetime of humiliations in his old world, he decides to use his knowledge of the plot and his current power to change his own destiny. Taking advantage of the opponent's shock, the guy bossily asks why the secretary is still standing there sweating without doing anything. With a firm and threatening gesture, he points to the shards on the floor and complains about the mess spread across the rug. Exuding a dark aura of absolute superiority, his final order comes out dry and unquestionable, demanding the trash be cleaned up right away. Staring at the shattered pieces, the MC renews a rock-solid promise to himself that he would survive this place at any cost. In that fantasy world, the imperial bloodline was not just regular nobility. They were treated like absolute deities who owned everything. Gifted with exclusive skills and beautiful blonde hair, they were all symbols of unquestionable power, with the exception of the useless seventh prince. Exactly because of this, the secretary's expression oozes a deep, silent disgust at having to bow down to this kid. Abiran did not have the smarts or the features, with his black hair being a cursed trait that always sparked doubts about his lineage. For Sign, it was a bitter humiliation to have burned piles of money on bribes just to end up serving a spineless coward with no future. Despite all the grudge eating away at his mind, the man swallows his pride and obeys, getting on his knees to clean it all up. Scrubbing with contained fury, he complains about the wasted time, but announces through gritted teeth that the job was finally done. As soon as the man asks to be excused and tries to stand up, a full cup flies through the air and smashes right into the chair. The container shatters in front of him, getting everything wet again, making the noble comment that his slow cleaning skills required a bit more practice. With the cruel, relentless look of a true villain, the prince orders the staff member to clean up the new shards as fast as possible. Cornered and sweating bullets, Sane tries to use the Empress as a threat, warning that the kid's hostile behavior would have to be reported to her. Spotting the bluff from a mile away, Abiran concludes that the lackey's stubbornness required even heavier measures to nip that problem in the bud. The MC then turns his face and orders the young maid to cover her own ears immediately, leaving her pretty surprised. The brutal intimidation of threatening to take her fingers if she heard a single word of the conversation pulls an instant stream of obedience. Totally desperate with the looming panic, Anna presses her hands against her head with as much force as she can put into her arms. With the witness isolated by fear, the young man dictates in a low, threatening tone a series of crushing truths directed at the secretary. With every word of that cruel whisper, the man's arrogance evaporates, replaced by the purest terror upon realizing his secret was out. The shock is so violent that the secretary loses all color instantly, showing the silent dread of someone who just looked their own destruction in the eye. Sometime after this mess, Anna whispers in the yard with her coworkers about how His Highness was acting super weird. The staff members agree with the assessment and express the dread they feel regarding the scary spike in the prince's aggression. The unanimous consensus in the laundry circle is that Abiran's sudden disappearance inside his own quarters served as a wonderful collective relief. However, Anna's peace crumbles as soon as she hears the reminder that it was her day in the rotation to clean the beast's rooms. Far away from there, a peaceful vibe ruled the royal library, lit by perfect sunbeams warming the ancient books stacked on the desk. Holding a cup of tea, the guy considers his acting as a cruel monarch a huge success since everyone stayed scared and kept their distance. The bonus of that whole act was getting rid of the insolent Sign, saying his patience so he would not have to break more dishes on his head. Sipping his drink in peace, Aberon relaxes with the comfort of knowing he still had whole years before the plot of his imminent demise caught up to his life. The familiarity with that universe brought some nostalgia, sparking memories of the rough times when he found the book collecting dust in a public library. With the story's big hero still far from showing up, the best option right now was to tune out the looming pressures and enjoy the quiet peace. Admiring the spectacular view through the large windows, he actually catches himself wishing for a pair of wings to explore that vibrant, endless blue sky. Suddenly, the peace is shattered by a tearing anomaly that burns right through his very being without warning or apparent reason. The violent shock and loss of breath make his muscles give out, tossing the fine porcelain against the floorboards. The prince collapses dazed, hitting his shoulder, completely disoriented by the bizarre sensation of his body boiling from the inside. The agonizing pain was 1,000 times worse than the tragedy of his past life, forcing out desperate tears that mixed with the heat melting his veins. At the peak of this dark agony, Anna's formal knock echoes muffled through the doors demanding entry, but receiving no cry for help, stuck in his throat. Getting no response from the beast, the girl sneaks in using her broom as a shield to check out the dark space that seemed lonely and quiet. The relief of her false sense of security vanishes the second the white shards, scattered by the steps, catch her attention. With her naive heart always counting pennies, the girl's first reaction upon kneeling is to mourn the coins going down the drain in that pointless mess. The silence of the giant room is broken by weird sounds coming from behind the dark desk, instantly triggering the maid's alarm. The mysterious shadow turns out to be a massive, sinister bird gliding through the air grotesquely, to the overwhelming surprise of the girl trembling in place. The crazy home invasion forces her legs to step back in fear of the beak, raising the end of the broom to keep the flying threat away from the royal belongings. Worried that the furious animal would break something and trigger the assassin lord's wrath, she grabs the bird tightly by the sides, warning of the danger. Pinned between the girl's fingers, the little creature gives up resisting, sinking into the distress of his own puzzled thoughts. Being carried straight to the street like a problematic burden, Abiran found zero sense in suddenly having a beak and feathers. Anna decides to take the creature outside, knowing the danger, while the prince transformed into a crow panics, trying to warn her that he is the actual noble of that room. Ignoring the bird's silence, the maid tosses him out the window and orders him to fly away, completely disregarding his mute protest that this was a direct order. But gravity collects its toll instantly, sending the guy plummeting from the top of the castle tower in absolute despair. Free falling toward the ground makes him accept that his new life will end right there in a way just as ridiculous as his previous one. With his end drawing near, he wonders if he just needs to use the wings to manage to save himself. His survival instinct screams at him to flap his wings, absolutely refusing to perish in that place. Surprisingly, he manages to glide and soar back up, leaving the regretful maid shouting for the animal to return. Feeling the force of the wind in his feathers, the prince is amazed to realize he is genuinely in control of that creature. Enjoying the unbelievable flight for the first time, a cruel new doubt pops up about how he will manage to turn back into a human. Under the Empire's night sky, the mysterious power of transformation hovers over the silent castle. Back in the room, Abiran pants in relief after testing the transformation several times and confirming he can reverse the process. He just had to focus his mind on the desire for the change to happen, revealing total control over that bizarre gift. However, the mystery of how he got this crow power bugs him, since this skill never existed in the novel's original plot. Regardless of its origin, he decides that secret needs to be kept hidden from everyone at all costs. Staring into the night, he worries that any deviation from the original storyline could ruin his survival plans. Suspecting that the world's magic triggers the power, he's interrupted by his servant's warning calling him to the dinner ritual. He knows very well that the defining moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived tonight. The monthly banquet with the royals acts as a disguised succession test, where the seventh prince is completely ignored. Sitting at the farthest end of the massive table, the character's humiliation comes to life right before his eyes. The contrast between the bright blonde heirs reinforces just how much the MC resembles a gloomy crow. At that moment, a pink-haired young man walks up with pure arrogance, asking if the useless outcast doesn't feel ashamed to be there. It is Selos Evayaran, the eighth prince, who makes a point of showing exactly how much he despises him as a brother. With a violent slam on the table, Selos yells about being ignored by a mere extra who would soon vanish from the story. But the firm intervention of a high-class woman stops the fight, forcing the aggressor to apologize on the spot. She's the first princess, and beside her are the heirs positioned strictly by the rigid order of power. The strength of this world comes from Manus, a sacred energy that shows up stronger in lighter hair colors. Since the MC has black hair and no trace of this power, his fate was always rejection and resentment. However, the holder of the absolute highest tier of power has just taken his first steps into the hall. The emperor's imposing presence is announced by the glow of his golden hair, silencing the room. Walking under the devoted gazes of his court, the imperial deity takes absolute control of the ritual. Not wanting to waste time with tiring formalities, the Emperor orders the immediate start of the test. The ancient blue relic left by the first ruler is placed on the table, ready to measure everyone's strength. By channeling his own magic energy into the artifact, raw power begins to manifest intensely. A column of sky blue light shoots across the ceiling, visually indicating the monarch's unbelievable power level. Despite the crowd's awe at the beam reaching the end of the table, Abiran finds that flawless measurement a bit suspicious. The supreme leader then challenges the heirs to step forward and try to beat his record. Watching quietly from his corner, the prince just waits for his competitors' moves to unfold. Breaking the silence, the first prince confidently volunteers to show off his skills. Tradition dictates that only he competes since the established ranks of power are rarely changed. Focusing his prestigious energy, the eldest son looks to prove his superiority over the clan once more. The result of that test dictates who rules at the top and who gets tossed to the bottom of the imperial pyramid. But an unexpected physical reaction makes the young heir's imposing posture suddenly collapse. With a sudden thud, he drops coughing violently, causing widespread panic among the family members. Blood drips heavily from his mouth, staining the royal rug as witnesses cry out for help. Amidst the general chaos, only Aberon stays cool because he knows the exact tragic fate of his brother. His premature end would be inevitable, marking the true dark beginning of the events described in the book. Even though Manus is the blood heritage of the entire dynasty, each heir manifests a unique variation of the magic. While the first prince commands water currents, the second one manifests the devastating power of flames. The mark hit in the test would barely cover half the table due to his failing health dragging him down. With 6 months left until the main crisis hits, the early collapse of the young heir shakes up the shadows in the hallway. He realizes the timeline is shifting because the heir was not supposed to get sick this early in the original plot. This anomaly makes him wonder if his own never-before-seen crow power has a direct connection to these changes. The awakening of unknown magic right after his reincarnation was highly unlikely to be just a coincidence. At that moment, the original story's MC appears tall and imposing before the weakened heir. With arrogance, the prince underestimates him for not having control over the mystic energy. But the warrior claps back coldly, saying the noble would already be out of the picture if he were actually an assassin. He highlights how easy it was to break into the palace without leaving a trace, shattering his rival's false sense of security. Feeling humiliated in his own bedroom, the heir takes out his rage by smashing furniture in response to the taunt. The sudden drop in his sovereign status clashes heavily with the peace he enjoyed just a few hours ago. However, the brutal failure when trying to channel his magic power seals his despair in front of his new rival. A violent attack hits him hard, making him spit blood and drop to his knees on the floorboards. The agony of feeling his body burn while using magic brings the terrifying dread of losing his connection to Manus forever. Refusing to accept his downfall, he stumbles around yelling about his unshakable right to the imperial throne. He tries to get back on his feet looking for support, trying to convince himself he is above the mere mortals around him. As he tries to calm down with the hookah, the intruder coldly warns him to drop the object if he still wants to breathe. Startled by the sudden voice, the young man instantly turns around to face the shadows of his room. There stands the mysterious visitor, whose very presence radiates overwhelming physical strength. The prince tries to keep up his superior act, mocking the guy's inability to use Manus. But the intruder fires back with a sneer, reminding him the noble would have been easily wiped out if he were a real target. He reinforces the sheer audacity of his break-in by smoothly entering the second most guarded spot in the empire. Intrigued by the flaw in his security, the noble demands to know what trick was used for that flawless infiltration. Hearing that the intruder simply scaled the outer walls, the prince refuses to believe such a basic answer. Shifting focus, the warrior asks about his physical condition, pointing out that imperial doctors usually hide how bad illnesses really are. The comment triggers a bitter scoff from the heir, who tries to hide the growing panic over his weakness. Bursting into hysterical laughter, the prince tries to cover up the terrible truth that his own body is falling apart. Eberron finally gets the picture and comments that his brother used his brain a bit more than it seems. Furious, Raisha accuses him of using poison as leverage to spare his own life when he takes the throne. But the prince yells that the plan failed and calls him a foolish little brother as he tries to lunge forward. With total ice in his veins, the MC warns that in 1 week he will be begging to be put out of his misery while bleeding from his eyes and ears. The scary reveal leaves the guy paralyzed and completely speechless. Sitting comfortably, Abiran makes it clear he did not pull any tricks on his brother. He explains that the prince's body will quickly go downhill until the end, and that not even he knows who the real culprit is. At that, he seriously states that hearing out his current proposal is extremely important. Then, the guy adds that this is the absolute last chance to save his life. Already transformed into a crow and flying, he celebrates that his brother is just as cowardly as in the original story and did not send anyone to tail him. With the temporary ally secured, he knows he can use him however he wants from now on. The MC also praises the convenience of his new ability to fly to far-off places. At that point, he figures he should use the trip outside to take care of another piece of business. The bird then dives at high speed straight toward the city rooftops. At sunrise, the youngster faces the new situation not really knowing how to act. Anna worries outside the room since her boss has not eaten in 2 days and the room is dead silent. Terrified, the maid imagines getting the ultimate punishment if something bad happens to the noble under her watch. She starts banging on the door desperately, begging to know if the prince is okay. Getting no answer, the servant barges into the room all at once and ends up tripping while the youngster complains about the noise. Surprised, she wipes out on the floor and drops all the food onto the carpet. Seeing the mess everywhere, the girl freezes in fear over how her boss might react. The guy just stares down at her in an extremely calm manner. In tears, Anna takes the blame and begs for forgiveness for acting so recklessly. Shaking heavily, she tries to stutter out an excuse for the scene she caused. Abiran coldly asks how she plans to pay for dirtying his shoes, making the girl beg for her family's lives. To her surprise, the guy just tells her to clean it all up in 5 minutes and get out. He forbids the servant from coming near without being called and celebrates that the new rules will avoid more headaches. Time passes smoothly over the imperial palace under the open sky. 1 month has passed since the first prince collapsed during the power test. Soon enough, awful rumors that the main heir lost all his magic start making the rounds. For the other royal siblings, the gossip is a golden opportunity to make a grab for the throne. Trying to silence the chatter, the eldest son begs the emperor to move up the hunting competition. Riding his horse, Abiran notices the story is following the expected path, though he worries if the main hero was affected. Arriving at the festival grounds, the prince expects to run into the hero today to hand him a crucial item. Suddenly, Salos rides up on his horse to pettily mock the MC. He makes fun of Abiran's black mount, who just thinks about how his brother is way more annoying than in the book. Deciding to focus on the royal event, the guy simply tunes out his brother's childish insults. He actually prefers the dark horse and notices that the body's previous owner had quite a knack with animals. The group finally reaches the main meeting spot for the competition. The stunning mountain scenery opens up before the Imperial Knights. Right in front of them stands the Tower of Beginnings, the spot where the traditional opening ritual happens every year. Abiran recalls that the games will kick off as soon as the first prince wraps up the sacred rite. Behind all the partying, the young man knows the event is really just a cool flex of political power. The emperor orders the heir to get ready to start the rite, getting a positive reply. Reja fakes being nice by wishing his brother good luck and asking if he has already picked his prize. The guy points out that the tournament winner can ask the emperor for a wish, and the heir proudly agrees. The heir walks up to the altar under the watchful eyes of the nobility to prove his energy control. In the crowd, the nobles whisper about the privilege of witnessing royal magic, while some bring up the recent rumors. In front of the altar, the eldest son prays that the plan he got from the MC is not a total scam. Watching from a distance, Averon shows a focused and calm expression. The heir starts gathering his magic, swearing to eliminate his younger brother if he has been played. Abiran watches everything calmly and thinks to himself that his brother is way too tense. He trusts that something very interesting is about to go down if his instructions are followed perfectly. The sky starts darkening fast as the atmosphere gets wild. A torrent of sky blue energy explodes around the young mage at full force. The mystical whirlwind expands, creating a massive pillar of light and wind. Violent gusts of wind start whipping the trees all around the arena. The energy swirls out of control, forming a glowing tornado. The crowd of nobles backs away scared, not wanting to get swallowed by the magic storm. The guard leader orders everyone to fall back immediately due to the incoming danger. Amidst the power, the prince shouts proudly, claiming he is destined to become the great emperor. He yells the names of his bloodline with determination to lock in his sovereignty. Focusing all his mystic strength, the youngster tries to hit the peak of his energy. A colossal dragon of blue energy bursts from the magic flames, roaring at the heavens. Lightning and currents of power crackle across the mountaintop as the ritual comes to a close. Gradually, the energy storm starts fading into the air. The audience of nobles watches the whole show in absolute silence and awe. An experienced noble comments in amazement about the sheer scale of the royal family's power. The crowd erupts into cheers, praising the name of the first prince. In a flashback, Abiran hands a weird stone to his brother, who takes it looking annoyed, thinking it is a joke. The MC explains that the item drains corrupted energy, giving him the choice to treat himself or simply perish. Without many options, the heir swallows his pride and accepts the help offered. Back in the present, the young man knows that using this item ahead of time in the story bought him some precious time. Halfway down the path, a humble ally drops to his knees in front of the horse to greet the prince. Eberron receives him calmly as the man confirms he brought the mysterious luggage entrusted to him. Abiran chews out the secretary for his incompetence in handling a basic task, asking if he actually brought the bag in one piece. In silence, Sane curses having survived the ride with that wild horse, admitting he handed it over to the prince on purpose. A loud blast of trumpets echoes through the forest, announcing the start of the grand imperial event. In front of all the gathered nobility, the emperor raises his hand solemnly, declaring the hunt officially open. With the imperial order given, the massive royal hunting competition finally gets underway. As they move forward, the soldiers chat about their chances of winning to ask the emperor for a wish, even though they doubt the royals would actually allow it. Seeing the competitors rushing off, Aberon chooses to keep his cool and act stealthily, so he does not draw any unnecessary attention. The MC's main goal is to find the former commander of the Imperial Knights, the dreaded Lord Agony Fetus. Right beside his superior, the young sidekick Talon praises the divine power shown off during the opening ritual. The Duke coldly replies, saying the ritual just looked like a show by the Emperor to break the spirits of the nobles gathered there. Spooked by the bold statement, the assistant begs the leader to keep such dangerous thoughts completely to himself. The seasoned warrior just assures him he knows exactly why he's still breathing at his advanced age. Riding through the thick woods, the MC recalls that the Imperial Forest is strategically split into 3 different sectors. The map shows the small animal zone right at the entrance, followed by the mid-tier one, and the large creature area deep in the heart of the forest. Only knowing that a golden fox was delivered to the king in the original work, Abiran gets frustrated not knowing the animal's exact location. To track down the rare beast, Abiran previously used his crow form to fly over and map out the corners of the dense woods. He figures the right spot must be near the lake located in the southwest region of the map. Deciding to get a head start, the youngster pushes the black horse to run faster to guarantee the time advantage he needs. He calms down, remembering that the corrupt secretary delivered the suitcase on time, despite the super suspicious delay. His whole plan rides entirely on managing to hand the contents of that luggage directly to Duke Fetus. Suddenly, the mount slams on the brakes, almost tossing the prince forward with the unexpected jolt. He hops off the animal, confused by the sudden pit stop right in the middle of the trail. Looking at the frozen beast, the guy asks if it is feeling sick or if there is some serious problem. Getting no reply, he wonders if the animal caught the scent of some dangerous predator nearby. The MC hesitates for a second, noticing the real issue might be something way simpler and more annoying. He checks out the size of the package and starts wondering if the luggage's weight was the actual reason for the sudden halt. Annoyed by the stubbornness, the Lord yells at the animal for whining about a simple bag while others pull heavy carts. He threatens to leave the beast with no food if that bratty stubbornness keeps ruining the trip. Totally ignoring the owner's warning, the rebel horse pulls a U-turn and bolts away, kicking up dust. Alone and on foot in the middle of the deep forest, the guy just watches the animal's silhouette vanish far off into the trees. Without a ride to carry the heavy load, the young prince realizes the massive mess he got himself into. In another part of the woods, the sidekick Tolan mentions that normally they would have already easily hunted several wolves and deer. The kid complains about their apparent bad luck today, while the leader walks thoughtfully in silence. The veteran reflects on spending his whole life acting as the Empire's shield, but accepts that time and old age have finally caught up with him. Worried about his venting, the assistant asks the Duke not to talk like that, reminding him he is already a living legend. The memory of the ex-commander's grand battles highlights his achievements even though he just sees himself as a retiree these days. The veteran asks if the kid has ever had the chance to see the members of the imperial family up close. The commander warns that he will only understand the true greatness of those rulers when he looks them dead in the eye. An old memory highlights his family's loyalty, tasked with protecting the empire's majestic capital for centuries. Inside a carriage in the past, his father asked the heir to take pride in the honor of serving the imperial dynasty for generations. He pointed out the window showing the family's prosperous merchant group in charge of directly supplying the royals. The explanation about the city's greatness is cut short by a hard bump in the moving carriage. The noble demands to know what is going on after hearing the driver apologize for something getting stuck in the wheel. The staff member begs his boss to get back inside the vehicle while he clears the obstacle from the street. Looking down at the ground, the Duke finds the lifeless body of a child run over by the vehicle's wheel. Blood drips heavily from the wooden wheel of the carriage stopped on the cobblestone street. The Duke coldly concludes that the victim was just a wanderer trying to steal imperial tributes from the sacred temple. He adds with total indifference that violent ends like that are pretty common scenes in that part of the capital. The boy tries to peek out the window to figure out the commotion, but his dad immediately orders him to stay inside the vehicle. Spooked by the firm tone of his father's command, the kid shrinks back into his seat watching the door close. The father insists that the boy absolutely must not see what happened outside under any circumstances. He chooses to hide the brutal tragedy by lying to his son that it was absolutely nothing important. Back in the present, the old warrior bitterly recalls that the innocent victim must not have even been 10 years of age. The commander mourns the sad fate of the kid tossed into the incinerator, questioning the dark shadows hidden beneath the imperial glory. Interrupting his thoughts, Talon warns that they need to hurry up with the hunt to keep up the traditional family's honor. The warrior agrees and mentions knowing a nearby hiding spot where a highly sought-after golden fox usually shows up in the woods. Meanwhile, Abiran runs out of breath dragging the heavy load and swears he will roast his runaway horse the second he gets back to the palace. Unable to use his mystic transformation because of the cargo's weight, the prince worries about losing the trail of the former military commander. Guy remembers the forest's danger he scoped out from the sky, fully aware that even the small animal zone has big threats lurking around. A loud rustling in the leaves suddenly grabs his attention, signaling some wild creature was about to pop out of the bushes. Without a single weapon to defend himself against the incoming danger, the prince hesitates between dropping the load or facing the threat. Suddenly, young Talon spots a dark shape in the trees and hurls a heavy rock at what he thinks is an animal. The projectile slices through the air at high speed and nails Aberon right in the head, who was hiding in the thick brush. Rubbing the spot of the painful hit, the prince checks out the hair color of the attacker and starts suspecting his true identity. The commander shouts in concern for his assistant upon hearing the noise of the sudden attack deep in the forest. Seeing the guy's bluish hair, the MC instantly recognizes the loyal sidekick of his main target. The guy confirms it is indeed Tolan Krisa, the right-hand man of the exact person he needed to track down that day. Holding the rock that hit him, he realizes the massive mistake of bumping into that legendary duo so early on. The old and feared commander shows up ready for action in the clearing, wielding his classic combat sword. The elite warrior was set to be the future mentor of the original story's true hero, destined to shake the kingdom to its core. The black-haired lord goes into panic mode, realizing he absolutely should not have been spotted at that moment. The initial plan was to wait by the rare creature's den and accuse the Duke of trying to steal the royal's royal hunt. With that fake setup, he aimed to hand out an unfair punishment, forcing the veteran to carry a heavy load of rocks. Desperate over the brutal change in plans, he wonders how to spin this chaotic situation without ruining everything entirely. The Duke inspects the object thrown on the ground, puzzled by the crazy weight of the rock that seemed to have been thrown on purpose. Seeing his assistant down, Duke Fetus suspects the sneak attack was actually not meant for the kid, but rather an assassination attempt targeting him. Groaning in pain on the forest floor, Talon tries to pull himself together while the commander calls out worriedly to check his status. The veteran urges his helper to try and snap out of it and speak up immediately if he can recall any detail about what happened. Hiding away, Reincarnated panics, knowing the powerful fetus family protects the royals and that a rumor of a hit on the Duke would ruin his life. Still dizzy from the blow, the injured kid starts mumbling about what he managed to glimpse before taking a rock to the head. Hearing that, the seventh prince goes into full-blown panic mode over the chance of his plans completely backfiring right there. With blood dripping down his face, the assistant tries to piece his scrambled memories together under his leader's watchful eye. Talon apologizes to the Duke, explaining that everything went down way too fast, making the old man sigh in relief seeing he was okay. The commander accepts the excuse and asks the kid to give him a heads up if he remembers any other clue about the mystery attacker. With a serious and focused look, the veteran decides he will not let the culprit get away without an immediate chase. Taking advantage of the distraction, the MC realizes that is his one and only shot to bolt from there as fast as possible. The seasoned warrior orders his helper to wait on the spot while he goes after the culprit to catch him personally. Then the old guy sprints off at top speed, charging into the thick woods determined to catch the runaway. While running away, the young prince feels extreme exhaustion weigh down his body, complaining that hauling that heavy bag of rocks is basically taking him out. But he tries to calm down, believing he has already run far enough to shake off an elderly man. To his sheer terror, the legendary commander pops up right behind him, sprinting at a crazy speed that makes the kid question if he was actually retired. The veteran yells out, demanding the intruder reveal his mystic identity, swearing nobody will escape his grasp in the forest. Running completely out of breath, the youngster thinks about dropping the luggage once and for all to turn into a crow, cursing the absence of his rebel black horse. But he quickly ditches the idea of using his magic transformation, preferring to keep running on foot so he does not blow his secret. With that, the prince pushes his legs to the absolute limit, trying to squeeze out any distance advantage in the middle of the dense greenery. He vaults over the obstacles in his path in a desperate effort to keep up the fast pace of his getaway. Chasing closely, the Duke notices with surprise that the target suddenly sped up and seems to have subtly changed silhouettes among the trees. The warrior gets deeply annoyed, thinking his own eyesight might be failing due to old age fatigue. Reaching a clearing full of chopped logs, the old man stops abruptly and looks around, realizing he totally lost the intruder's trail. Hiding nearby, the youngster suddenly feels his body lighter, not sure if he partially turned into a crow or just caught his breath. The loud sound of hooves marching grabs his attention, making the guy wonder if the runaway horse decided to come back and save him. A close-up of the animal's eye shows the reflection of the forest as it charges toward the chase scene at full speed. The black horse shows up looking majestic and rears up right in front of him, confirming that this bizarre situation was actually happening in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, royal boots step firmly on the damp forest soil far away from all that mess. The second prince expresses total shock, asking if his older brother really managed to bag such a valuable prize so fast. Standing over the corpse of a colossal creature, the eldest son asks with arrogance if his brother doubts his mystic skills. The blonde hunter acknowledges his older brother's incoming win in the competition and asks what wish he will request directly from the emperor. With a cryptic smile on his face, the sick heir admits he has already planned exactly what favor he will ask of the empire's ruler. Far from there, Reincarnated rests exhausted under the shade of a massive tree, trying to get his strength back after the intense escape. Desperate, the seventh prince grabs his head, realizing just how bad his situation is after getting chased by the Duke. The kid realizes in a panic that he ended up losing the backpack of valuable rocks somewhere along the way while trying to ditch the old man. Rolling on the ground out of pure frustration, he complains about his terrible luck and whines that things could not possibly go more wrong than they already have. Lying flat on his back in the grass, the guy tries to chill out so he can think straight amid the chaos of the forest. He decides it is no use crying over it there, and figures the best move is to retrace his own steps to find the lost item. Back at the accident spot, young Talon celebrates the commander's return when he sees him walking down the forest trail. The Duke asks if the helper is feeling better from the hit, hearing that the pain went down, even though he still feels slightly dizzy. Next, the leader embarrassingly admits he ended up losing sight of the intruder, not knowing if the target was too fast or if he himself had just gotten old. The veteran shows off the fancy bag he found tossed in the bushes during his walk back, making the kid quite curious. Checking out the object, the assistant finds it weird that such a refined and pricey bag was completely stuffed with regular rocks inside. Hiding in the nearby bushes, the prince watches the duo anxiously, praying they do not connect him to that backpack. Suddenly, the MC steps out from behind the bushes, pointing straight at the object and grabbing the attention of the two elite warriors. The young assistant goes into instant shock, recognizing the figure of the seventh prince popping up so unexpectedly right in front of them. Quickly, the Duke and his subordinate bow in a sign of respect to formally greet the member of the imperial royalty. Ron Abiran steps up with an arrogant posture, confirming he was looking exactly for that bag that had mysteriously disappeared. The prince stares the duo down coldly, asking why his personal belongings are in their hands and questioning if they stole them. The commander denies the theft accusation right away, explaining he just found the item tossed in the grass while walking through the woods. The guy sarcastically says anyone would make up that excuse to avoid losing their hands, making the veteran swear on his family's honor. Pointing to the injured kid, the prince asks the reason for the bloody wound, hearing from the duke that it was from a recent accident. Tolan stays completely quiet under the noble's intimidating pressure, trying his hardest to keep his extreme nerves in check at that moment. In that silence, the assistant's mind flashes back to the quick image of the supposed intruder who had jumped through the trees moments before. Trying to clear up his suspicions, the injured boy works up the nerve and starts asking if the prince had any connection to the attack. At that, the MC steps in quickly and grabs the helper by the hair with extreme violence to shut down his bold talk. He yells that a mere commoner has no right to rudely butt into a conversation between nobles, calling the kid ill-mannered. The black-haired lord suggests he can fix the assistant's head if he keeps talking trash, asking for a sword to handle it right there. Desperate and trembling under the prince's aggressive grip, the young man feels the dread of his imminent end run through his whole body. The experienced warrior begs for mercy, promising to personally discipline his subordinate, calming down the noble prince's rage. In his thoughts, Ryan Abiran mocks the veteran's blind loyalty, acting like an obedient dog of the empire even when seeing his ally in danger. The commander stays bowed down, anxiously waiting for the cruel royal family member's final verdict. He internally reflects that the future heir of that bloodline will also grow up to become just another loyal servant, strictly following the crown's orders. Flipping his attitude, the MC holds out the backpack of rocks and declares he will trust the valuable load to the experienced warrior's care. Exuding a scary aura, the prince warns that the contents are super important and demands the leader protect it even with his own life. The veteran gulps hard, facing the overwhelming pressure and the implied threat coming from the young, dark-haired prince. Bowing once more, the commander accepts the mystery mission, guaranteeing total obedience to the seventh prince's direct orders. Saying goodbye in a laid-back way, the guy walks off wishing them both a good hunt while feeling the relief of having handled the situation. Walking alone, he laughs at his own acting skills, feeling a bit bad for the young assistant, but satisfied with planting the seeds of his plans. On his knees in the clearing, the assistant bursts into tears and apologizes deeply to the Duke for causing all that trouble. The veteran comforts him, saying he should just be thankful he made it out alive, ordering them to head back and rest immediately. At that point, the youngster reveals he remembered a crucial detail about the face of the person who threw the rock at him in the woods. The assistant confidently claims that the mystery attacker was actually the very same seventh prince who just threatened them. However, the Duke cuts him off with a strict look and tells the kid to shut his mouth right away, banning another word on the topic. The prince recalls that, in the original story, the Duke would launch a massive rebellion the following year due to the tragic loss of his own son. But to speed up that event and make the revolt kick off right during this competition, he needed to trigger a major push. Right then, the first prince announces that his big wish for the emperor is to start urban development in the temple area. The blonde heir arrogantly states he plans to wipe out all the beggars living like pests around the sacred grounds. Hearing the cruel statement, Duke Fetus realizes with heavy sorrow that his family's fate is officially sealed. The experienced warrior is deeply shaken by the awful decision made by the heir to the imperial throne. With this, the veteran will inevitably be pushed to rebel against the crown, fulfilling his tragic role in the script. As the sun starts setting on the horizon, silence rules once again over the kingdom's vast forest. Hiding out in the thick brush, the MC checks his surroundings to make sure nobody saw his getaway. Rana Biran watches the trail feeling relieved, remembering he had already scouted the whole area from above as a crow to avoid witnesses. Walking away from the camps, the guy reflects with some guilt about acting like a total scumbag villain against the Duke. The youngster plans to wrap up his schemes as soon as the contest ends, but gets startled by a familiar voice on the path. The first princess, Mentala Biran, pops up on the trail thinking it is weird to see her youngest brother walking totally alone out there. Surprised by the random run in the middle of nowhere, the seventh prince formally greets the imposing woman. She waves off the stiff greetings, reminding him with a superior tone that they share the exact same royal blood after all. Mental asks where he left his horse, and the NC lies, saying he dropped it off at the stables to take a little walk. Suspicious of her little brother's dodgy answer, the woman starts analyzing the situation, looking visibly doubtful. She wonders to herself about the real reason the kid is lying straight to his own family's face. Catching the tension in her eyes, the prince asks what is up with that sudden suspicious look. The noble reveals her servants found his black horse wandering alone and aimlessly through the west forest. Hearing that, Rana Biran plays it cool, coldly stating he ordered the animal's execution for disobeying royal commands. Then he bows down apologizing for lying to hide the embarrassment of losing control of his ride. The young woman orders him to stand up so others do not think she's bullying her own brother. At that, she says she's relieved her little brother made it back safely and offers a new mount from her stables if he needs one. The MC concludes his sister is super dangerous for perfectly hiding her real intentions behind sweet talk. But he finds her quiet exit weird, wondering if the princess's mystic mind-reading powers totally failed on him. While the darkness of night covers the royal camp, the lights in the nobles' tents stay on. In the Duke's quarters, the doctor reports that the assistant Talon suffered a bad accident tripping and hitting his head repeatedly on the rocks. The doctor points out that while common on hunts, he has never seen someone get that banged up just tripping over stones. The commander asks about the recovery time, hearing that the internal injury is serious and needs 1 week of total bed rest. Talon protests against being forced to rest, but the Duke calms the young assistant down, assuring him he fully recognizes his loyalty. The commander orders him to rest until the tournament wraps up, promising he will personally handle all the leftover tasks. Touched by his boss's concern, the kid accepts the order and promises to try his hardest to bounce back soon. The veteran jokes about the assistant taking a vacation right in the middle of a hunt, while the kid secretly thinks his dream is just to chill out. The leader promises to win the competition so he can gift the kid the mining rights to a very valuable gold mine. Hours later, silence takes over the room under the faint light of a single candle burning down slowly. The helper sleeps soundly in his bed, finally free from the pressures of his exhausting military gig. While he rests, a mysterious letter is sneakily left right next to his personal belongings. Watching the scene from the shadows, the MC scoffs at the Duke's submissiveness, calling him an obedient dog who ignores real danger. Outside, the commander bitterly regrets raising his own son to follow the exact same path of blind servitude to the crown. Unable to sleep with all the conflicting thoughts, the veteran decides to step out for a walk to catch some fresh night air. The warrior's eyes reflect the massive heartbreak of carrying such heavy secrets regarding his family line's future. Right then, he spots the intriguing backpack full of rocks on the ground that the seventh prince ordered him to carry. The lord picks up the heavy load with determination, ready to carry out the bizarre command he got from the royal family member. Hauling the weight on his back, the old man heads toward the old forest temple, intending to reveal something incredibly important. During the walk, the veteran flashes back to when he told his son the legend of the savior who came down from the heavens to end the chaos. Little Flynn replied excitedly that he already knew the classic tale of the legendary emperor Sierra the Great. Standing in front of the founder's imposing statue, the father explained that the deity used mystic powers to unite the warring nations. The ancient emperor gave his name to the grand empire the Duke's family has sworn to loyally protect for 1,000 years. With a loving look, Duke Fetus declared that little Flynn was his most precious treasure in that cruel world. The dad asked the boy to follow in his footsteps and become a proud sword to defend the imperial crown. Back in the present, the old man questions why he is lugging that useless sack of rocks around in the middle of the night. He wonders if he is doing it out of genuine loyalty to the nobles or just out of blind obedience to his old habits. Suddenly, the booming sound of a war horn echoes through the whole forest, snapping him out of his thoughts. The veteran instantly recognizes the audio signal announcing the early shutdown of the hunting activities. The next morning, the crowd of soldiers stares in shock at the massive pile of colossal monsters taken down in just one night. The guards gossip that the first prince slaughtered all the beasts, basically wrapping up the royal tournament's results in a devastating way. A huge blast of mystic energy is shown off to the nobles to celebrate the heir to the throne's overwhelming achievement. The official announcer proclaims that the young heir set a historic hunting record that is absolutely unbeatable in the kingdom. With the court cheering, the first prince is officially declared the grand undisputed champion of the hunting competition. Standing before the throne, the winner bows respectfully and takes in the emperor's formal congratulations on his win. Following ancient imperial tradition, the ruler orders the heir to announce what his grand reward wish will be. The crowd of nobles whispers anxiously, wondering if the request will be as bloody as the military conquests from previous years. The first prince explains that the sacred temple is swarming with miserable wanderers who threaten the safety and dignity of the area. He claims that the presence of those people completely trashes the glorious aesthetic of the empire's holy zone. Hearing the cold reasoning, Duke Fetus feels panic wash over him as he sees the incoming tragedy. The veteran recalls the brutal image of imperial soldiers taking out innocent people under the excuse of purifying the land. The heir formally requests permission to eliminate all the needy folks living around that temple. At that moment, a desperate memory of his own son crying out for help pops into the warrior's tortured mind. The kid's agonizing scream makes the commander relive the pain of the loss that tore his family apart in the past. Gripping the handle of his sword, the father regrets acting like an obedient servant while his own heir was in danger. He relives the nightmare of seeing little Flynn hunted down ruthlessly by the troops he himself swore to defend. The Lord silently asks his late son for forgiveness, carrying the eternal guilt of failing to save him from imperial cruelty. However, a weak and shaky voice from the past tries to get some words out through the mess of memories. The injured little boy slowly opens his eyes and asks who the mystery person standing right in front of him is. Colin tries to jump up quickly to greet the seventh prince, but Ryan advises him to move slow so he doesn't get dizzy. Not getting the surprise visit, the young assistant questions why the noble is there while the prince thinks about scoring some better meds for him. Skipping the small talk, Ryan asks if the kid has any idea how serious the situation the Duke is currently in really is. Hearing that the closing ceremony probably already started, Talent freaks out and repeats the info in sheer disbelief. At that, the guy rushes off toward the ceremony courtyard, knowing he needs to catch up to the commander as fast as possible. Shoving his way frantically through the gathered soldiers, the assistant mutters apologies while trying to squeeze past the crowd. He keeps pushing the guards aside with effort, completely focused on reaching the main stage before time runs out. In the distance, Duke Fetus appears kneeling before the heir to the throne, surrounded by armed soldiers watching the scene. The first prince looks down at the veteran with disgust, questioning the audacity of that interruption with a threatening tone. Witnessing the scene from afar, Talon freezes in dread, trying to process what is going down over there. Duke Fetus proudly declares that his family has served the crown from the very beginning, protecting the Imperials for over 1,000 years. Then, he states that his bloodline will take on the humble task of dealing with the needy folks around the sacred temple. From the top of his throne, the Emperor watches the veteran's plea in total silence, sizing up his vassal's bold move. The first prince brushes off the request, saying he will grant the wish out of respect for the Duke's years of service. But the heir adds with a sneer that he finds it hilarious to see that loyalty being used specifically to go against a royal decision. Flexing a strong aura of blue magic, the first prince asks if the veteran honestly thought he would catch any mercy. The heir points his power and warns that the Duke's actions count as serious treason, punishable by an immediate end right on the spot. Accepting his tragic fate, the commander declares he will pay with his own life for the sin of interrupting the sacred ceremony. In the crowd, Talon screams in absolute despair seeing his lord's terrible fate sealed in front of everyone. Ranabirin coldly watches the conflict kick off, secretly wishing the story's actual hero is out there watching everything too. Meanwhile, a mysterious hooded youngster rests by a stream surrounded by lush green mountains. Suddenly, a weird mystic vibration starts pulsing from the water, instantly catching the lone traveler's attention. The guy holds his canteen while staring in visible awe as the blue energy spreads out all around him. The magic surge acts as a distant warning about the crushing power of the imperial family that destiny will force him to face. The young man revealed a determined look, confirming he is Ratal, the true NC of that medieval fantasy story.